Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Well, first I'd like to welcome the Minister here. It's the first time I've had an opportunity to congratulate you on your appointment, so well done, and you're no stranger to this House, and I really appreciate you being here. I also want to thank, of course, the Green Party for proposing this important motion on loneliness. And I suppose the very outset I want to acknowledge the enormous amount of work that our former Senator Keith Swanwick did in relation to this area. Keith Swanwick was a senator here for a number of years, and he assembled in a very impressive group of people and produced a document called A Connected Ireland, an Ireland free from loneliness, and he issued a number of very important asks and tasks, and needless to say, many of them have not been done. And that's a pity, because it was a very eminent group of members on the task force from the wide sector stakeholders in relation to this area. And I think his report, and I'd ask the Minister to dust off his report again, too many reports sitting up on shelves gathering dust. We don't need any more reports. We know what the challenges are around loneliness, the social isolation, the exclusion. We don't know enough about the demographics of it, but we know a lot about the impact of it, as the previous senators have spoken in outlining it. So clearly I would say that I would ask that this report, Minister, be taken down again, looked at, because I think it's a very, very important piece of work. When you talk about loneliness, I think you can't talk about loneliness in isolation to mental health. And mental health is so important, and it's still something that many people are coming to terms with. And I'm particularly conscious of rural communities, but I'm particularly conscious of rural farmers, particularly single rural farmers, and in many cases the ones that I'm dealing with are men, but not always, who have inherited being the oldest, who have for many reasons not established a partnership or a relationship with anybody else. They feel a duty of care, a duty of responsibility to keep on the homestead, to keep up on the tradition of agriculture, and with all of that they pay a price, and that price is isolation, and it's loneliness, and it's the responsibility of the inheritance of the family and the destiny and the lineage and the heritage of family resting on their shoulders. And in the end, it takes its toll. But it takes its toll perhaps too late for many, and they've become older and isolated and vulnerable. I speak of family members myself who've had this experience, and sadly one of them who committed suicide. And it was afterwards, when the family came back to the homestead, that rural little homestead in the hills of Wicklow, they suddenly discovered a whole other story through what was left behind that home. And when you go back into a homestead of a single old man that has never, maybe had no one in it for 6, 8, 10 years, it peels back issues around alcoholism, isolation, and a whole range of other issues that make it really, really sad. And we discovered then we're only really beginning to accept those people. We did not provide them with their space or capacity to be themselves, to be authentic. And all this feeds into this isolation, and all this feeds into this loneliness, and all this feeds into their mental health. And really it's a very, very sad picture. So I think there's a wake-up call in relation to the whole area. It knows no bounds. It is of all ages. They're not all old people, they're not all marginalised people, they're not all minorities, but clearly there are real, real issues, and I particularly think that the farming organisations have done a lot of work on this, but we've got to cross, it's urban and it's rural, and I think it's an amazing challenge. I want to touch on the mental health reform and the promoting improving mental health, because again in this briefing document that was sent out on the 1st of May 2024, it touches on, and says, its opening remarks says, the government commitments relating to loneliness assigned to the Department of Health have not yet been progressed. So Minister, I draw your attention to that. I'm sure you have a copy, but I'll send you a copy anyway. And they set out 3 key messages. And we know that's echoed in the Greens motion here today, of which it talks about the programme for government. And if you look at the programme for government on page 51, it says that develop a plan aimed at tackling loneliness and isolation, particularly among older persons, as outlined in the Reaching Out Social Inclusion policy document. So we're coming to the end of our government, and sadly this hasn't got the priority. Now, there are many other priorities. That's not to be critical of government. You can't get everything over the line, and today we're even talking about it, and that's progress. So I do think it's important, and I appreciate the Greens have highlighted this in their motion here today, but I do think it's really, really important that that issue is addressed. Finally, in wrapping up, I just want to say, you know, I've touched on the Department of the Taoiseach and the expert group. That's a call. I think that's an important one. Fulfilling the programme for government is another ask. I fully support that, and I think it's right. It's late in the day, but I think it's right now. We should really keep the focus on that in the next few months, Minister. And in relation to your suggestion to this motion in the name of the Green Party, mandate every local authority to prepare a local strategy. I think it's a really good idea because the people are on the ground and they know closely what's going on there. And I think that's important through use of public relevant libraries and other buildings. But I think that will need some ring-fence funding for it. And I think it will need city and county managers to identify a key person in each of those local authorities to really drive this initiative ahead. So look, I want to congratulate the Green Party councillors on their work. I think there's a lot of information out there, as I said, Minister. Connected Islands and Ireland Free from Loneliness by Dr. Keith Swanwick, former Senator, and the mental health reform paper that was sent to us. I think there's a lot in that, and if you could take that on board, I think we'd be making steady progress. Thank you.
Senator.